So you remember episode 17? That's when we wound the clock back and talked about wrestling like they did before the curtain was drawn back and everyone admitted that, yeah, it's a work. It's not a legit combat like we've been telling you all these decades. That era was what was known as the era of Kayfabe. Partly, that's hence the name of this show, because I grew up in there. This show was renamed as partly an homage to what I grew up with, when pro wrestling was treated as a legitimate sport, and the results from Friday night shows were shown in the results section of the Saturday papers, right alongside the football and other sports results. The other part of an acronym is for that other F word, the rude one. Figure it out. So, what is the counter for that episode? I'll tell you in a moment, because the credits are rolling in like thunder. Welcome to another episode of If You See Kayfabe. I'm your wrestling mate from down under. I'm Southernjoe. So what does one do after a truly kayfabe episode? Well, he explains kayfabe and all the other terminology that was once only allowed to be spoken by those in the wrestling business. Firstly, the word itself. Kayfabe was the overall word for the code that those in the wrestling business spoke to each other, so that way they could speak out in public anywhere without giving away the scripted nature of their business. It would be much like if you and I and a work colleague, or you and a work colleague stepped into an elevator and then someone outside of your business was there as well. And you could be like, hey, Callum, did you get that set of 546s out to the guy up north? And Callum would be like, yeah, Joe, but we had to supply the UFIs and not the Rycos. Now, when I explained to my wife, Adriana, that kayfabe was maintaining the illusion that wrestling was legit and not predetermined, she set out a challenge for me. She asked if I knew where the actual word kayfabe came from. Now, after some research, the most plausible origin is that kayfabe seems to be drawn from a Pig Latin version of saying ache-fay. Now, so as those in the wrestling business say, let's talk inside baseball. Now, even that term basically means that you are like peeking behind the curtains, behind the scenes. So there's the owner of the company, the wrestling company, and many times he'll also be the promoter, which is the guy who organises advertising for the wrestling events that's going to take place in whatever town or city that they're in, or a TV show, or the booker, who's the guy who says which wrestlers will go against each other and why. The why two wrestlers wrestle each other is also known as an angle. Now, this is the story that we, the audience, are given as to why certain wrestlers face each other. Sometimes it can be over a title belt, or an angle can be over a more personal issue. So the booker will tell who beats who, and also the how and the why. In smaller companies and with big companies with domineering owners, the booker and or the promoter might be the same guy as the owner. The roster of wrestlers are generally split up into good guys and bad guys. The good guys are known as baby faces or simply faces, while the bad guys are heels. If a wrestler is going from one side to another, insiders say he is either doing a heel turn, and that is basically he starts wrestling as a bad guy, or if it's a face turn, it's a previously bad guy looking to redeem himself by starting to wrestle fairly and getting cheered. Back in the kayfabe era, faces and heels would basically be sequestered to separate locker rooms, and that was in order to maintain kayfabe, and their finishes would be given to them separately either by the booker or the ref or one of the booker's associates. The associates were commonly known as a stooge. A stooge can be an associate of the booker or basically a plant by the boss to find out all the dirt that he wouldn't normally know about because people wouldn't say it to his face. A finish is basically that, how a match finishes. It can be either by pinfall, submission, a disqualification, or a count out. Now, those are all pretty self-explanatory. There would usually be a reason for how and why a match would finish a certain way, as that's what would either further a story or end it. When a match was to end a feud between two wrestlers, it would be known as the blow-off match. And a clean finish means that the result is done without any cheating or outside interference, any shenanigans. A dusty finish is one that's attributed to the late legend Dusty Rhodes, who came up with convoluted finishes that would cause uproar, but would basically have you want to see what happens next. When a wrestler lets another guy win, he is said to have done a job for him, or job to him. Now, there's also an unfortunate term for a wrestler who loses most of his matches, and he used to be known as a jobber. The more compassionate term these days is enhancement talent, because his special skill set is to get a star or a potential star over. Now, getting over means that you are a hit with the audience. This means they are cheering madly for you if you're a babyface, or they boo you and despise you if you're a heel. Going over, however, just simply means that you're the one that's going to win the match. Yay! The audience, now that's us watching the shows, we're known as marks. A mark is an old carnival term for someone that you want to entice to buy a ticket from you or participate in your entertainment. In wrestling, this would be done by attracting marks to come buy a ticket to see the face beat up the heel. Now, I love the story behind how the term mark got its name, and I'm going to share it with you. The owner of a carnival game would send his stooge out amongst the public to find someone that they believe will spend money, and they'll try and win their game, but will probably fail. And that's pure profit for the owner. The stooge would have chalk dust on his palm. So when he tapped a person on the shoulder or accidentally bumped into someone and, put his hand on their back to say, oh, sorry about that, mate. The chalk mark left on the mark's clothing let the carnival operator know that that was the mark that has been especially chosen to try his luck. In wrestling, marking out also is when someone legitimately cheers for someone that they really like because they appreciate their work. Now, even wrestlers will say that they marked out for a fellow worker. Now, a worker is what the wrestler is known as inside the business. Wrestling is known as a work. It means that you work the audience to convince them that the conflict between the combatants is real, and a shoot is when it is for real. Now, there's also a work shoot, which is when a storyline is somewhat based on real life and the lines between storyline and reality is a bit blurred. Now, you may hear the term dark match from time to time. This is a match that is done as a warm-up match before a TV taping or a pay-per-view. It's basically a way to hype up the crowd, but can be used by a wrestler as a trial for certain wrestlers who want to try and impress the powers that be. The wrestlers usually all have gimmicks. These are the traits that sets them apart and that they're known by, and what defines them. You know, from George the Animal Steel eating turnbuckles to The Undertaker's whole dead man persona, all the way through to Hulk Hogan ripping off his shirt and to the Road Warriors with their spiked shoulder pads. When a heel infuriates the audience by being bad, he is said to be generating heat. A wrestler can also have heat with another wrestler or with his bosses if he's done the wrong thing. A cheer from the crowd is known as a pop. And if a wrestler is being punished for having heat but the company doesn't want to sack him, so heat with the company, but the company doesn't want to get rid of him, they will bury him, and that means to push him further down the card, which is the insider term for the event. It's called a card. There is usually an order in which most wrestlers participate in the structure of an event or a card. Those in the opening bout, they're usually referred to as curtain jerkers. I love that term. Then there are mid-carders, pretty self-explanatory, and the main eventers, the workers who close out the show and make it a memorable show. If you hear about a wrestler taking a bump, that's simply the act of that guy hitting the mat or the floor. If he wants to be seen as a reliable worker, he will sell the bump of his opponent when it's required. The selling, that's basically the art of the wrestler reacting to what has happened to him. You know, if he's kicked or punched, he will register that pain like he would if it was a real fight. That's the art of selling. Unless it's part of an angle, a no-sell will get you in trouble. This means if you don't react naturally to getting hit and selling it, there will be trouble at some point because you're not reliably telling the physical story of the match. A squash match is when it's done quickly and effectively. And this used to be done more in the 80s and earlier, when TV matches were pretty much between a star wrestler and the aforementioned enhancement talent, where basically you already knew the result before the bell rang. Now that's enough for today's session. If you have any other terms that you'd like me to interpret, whack them in the comments section below. I'm happy to report that I now have over 200 subscribers because as well as this show, I also have the Southernjoe West Ham show. That's basically dedicated to my favourite EPL team, West Ham. I've also got some old TV bits from my old, almost defunct VHS collection. One video that has been getting quite a few comments lately, it's an old Piper's Pit from the mid-80s where Hogan comes out after Piper's recap of recent Piper Pits and sets up the historical WrestleMania 3 showdown between Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant. Please like, subscribe, and hit the notifications bell. You might notice the video is looking a touch better. That's because I'm now using Riverside FM rather than Zoom. It's still free, but it's also going to be such a big help when I do my next interviews. Also, please share with all your wrestling mates, and I welcome all your feedback. I lastly really hope that Shane McMahon does join up with AEW. That would be an amazing boost for AEW's stocks. But in the meantime, this is Southern Joe, your wrestling mate from down under, saying hooroo.